Welcome to Lift Leadership Podcast with Bobby Alger. Each episode, Bobby will share insights and tips from his over 25 years of church leadership experience. For new episodes and more information, please visit crossroadswinchester.com.
Hi everyone, Bobby Alger here, and welcome to our second podcast of Lift Leadership. In today's session, I want to talk to you about, are you leading from vision or are you leading from values, and what's the difference? In my last podcast, we talked about selecting loyal leaders, and that really was born out of mistakes that I made over a period of time and how I was selecting leaders. And I trust that you have seen that, watched that, and received from it, and maybe passed it along to a friend that you thought could benefit as well. And today we're going to look at the difference between leading from vision or leading from values. Now, I realize that my leadership has come out of 27 years in pastoral ministries. I started out on the farm, and then I had a stint for a period of time in business. After that, I jumped into a multi-site and a multi-location church setting. During that time, it was a 6-year period of time. I learned a lot of leadership, again, with a lot of different leaders and going to seminars and reading books. And then after 6 years, I resigned and planted a church from scratch, moved an hour north and started a church from scratch where I've been now for 21 years. During that time, I also had a side business for 10 years. And then the church began to grow in recent times, and so I dispersed of that business. So that's kind of the context of where I come from. I realize that most of my leadership has been in a spiritual setting, but I believe that the principles that I'm giving for you today will fit in whether you're leading a family, whether you're leading a small group, whether you're leading a small business, or maybe even in a large corporation. I believe that the principles that I'm giving you today will help you and encourage you. So let's jump in of what it means to lead from vision or from values. By the time that we finish today, I hope that you'll be able to assess yourself and recognize that which one you have the tendency to lean towards. I was traveling back from a funeral riding with an administrative pastor, and he was frustrated with his church leadership. So I began to ask him questions. I said, how are your leaders selected from the people? And he said, well, the way that we do it, we have anybody in our congregation submit names of people that they feel would make a good leader. And I thought, wow, that's different from how I would do it. But what do you think the average person is thinking about when they submit a name or select a person? He said, well, I would imagine they would think, do they have Bible knowledge? Do people like them? Maybe an ability to speak? And I said, so they're not really thinking about, do they carry vision, or do they have the ability to lead people, or can they, have that charisma about them that rallies people? And he said, no, probably not. And I thought, wow. No wonder you're frustrated, and no wonder the people are frustrated. They're ready to go somewhere and do something, but they don't have a visionary leader to lead them. That's a problem. So as we look at this idea of working from vision or from values, I want to target vision first. What does it mean to lead from vision? And if you've ever obtained a life coach, one of the things they will have you do is to write down a personal vision. Now, I've not done that, but I have, in conjunction with my wife. We went to a consultant some years ago, and he had us develop a ministry/marriage vision. Now, as we were given that responsibility or we were given that assignment, one of the things that we did that I look back now and I thought, wow, that was kind of novel. We asked the question, what have others said about our leadership? Not just what do we think, but what have others said about us? And we begin to take that into consideration as we begin to build our visionary statement, our vision statement that was born out of what others were saying, what was on our heart, and then we mix that all together, put the stew in the pot, let it cook for a little bit on the stove, and we came out with a vision slash marriage slash ministry statement that we look back on today and say, yep, that's us. And so as you begin to develop a vision statement for your organization, again, if you're the primary leader of that, you first of all have to start with, who am I and how am I wired? And one of the things that I found, a tool that I found that was most helpful in that, is a personality test. Now, I've taken many personality tests over the years. I've taken the DISC, I've taken the Taylor-Johnson, I've taken the Enneagram, I've taken Strength Finders. But the one that I found that was probably the most helpful in this area of understanding how I do vision is the Berkman behavioral model. That's not really well known in most circles. It's if you're in a business setting, you may have heard of it because that's more prominent there. But one of the things the Berkman showed me is it really puts people in 4 quadrants. The first one is a planner, a thinker. The second one is a communicator, a talker. The third quadrant is a doer or an expediter. And the fourth one is an administrator or a numbers type person. So here's kind of how here's kind of how my profile came out. I primarily was a planner and a thinker. And then secondarily, I was a communicator. And then the last 2 categories, I was tied between that of a doer and that of administrator. And as I look back, I begin to realize that in regards to vision, I would think and I would plan and I would write it down and I would communicate, and then I would run out of gas. I would just totally, when I got to the implementation stage, I would just run out of gas. I had put so much emotional time and energy into thinking and planning and communicating. When it came time to really do it, I just kind of lost it. And I wondered many times why this incredible vision never went anywhere. And it's because I had put too much energy in the front end and not really recognized I needed to kind of stage myself in order to carry it all the way through and make the adjustments. So what did I do? Once I realized that, I made some adjustments, and I realized I need to save some gas for the journey, not just getting started or idling there before I came out of the parking lot. And the other thing that I did was I realized that I had this natural bent to plan and think and communicate. I needed to bring a team around me that were expediters and doers. Not that they didn't have their own vision, but they were like standing outside my door saying, what do we do next? What do we do next week? Or come to a staff meeting. And they were ready to engage. And so I realized that that's what's happened over the years, that I've intentionally brought on people that are doers. They are ready to go. They're ready to implement the vision that is set forth. And I think that's very I think that's very important to learn how you're wired and how you do vision, and to be able to then bring others around you that complement you in that way. So as we look at vision, realize that vibrant organizations always have visionary leaders up front. And visionary leaders are those, again, that not only build a vision, but they communicate the vision, but they also either themselves or bring a team around them that are able to put that vision into place. And so one of the things that I realize is you have to know how you are wired as a person if you are the primary leader in that. And instead of running the full race myself, I learned how to set up a relay. And obviously, if you've ever run or understand a relay race, that the most important part of the race is the passing of the baton. can that baton be passed? Can that vision be passed to someone else that can run with it as equally as what you have in mind? And I realize also that a good vision should never rise and fall on you as a primary leader. It should be shared with your core team as well as the people in your organization. Everybody owns it together and is running and doing their part. Now I want to talk about just a couple of things that what makes vision effective. And that is, first of all, is a little bit of a recap, but first of all, we'll dig in a little bit deeper. In order to have an effective vision, first of all, you need to understand yourself. And I just kind of went over that. What are your strengths and what are your limitations? And recognize that you don't have it all. And for a period of time, I probably thought I had it all. And then I began to mature and realize I don't. And so I began to then grow in my strengths and staff my limitations or weaknesses. Now, you don't have to have a staff in order to do that. You can do that with volunteers or other people around you. Just recognize who you are and who you're not, and know the difference, and be able to build a team around you that, again, has your areas of weaknesses that is their strengths. The other thing about an effective vision, number 2, is that visionary leaders don't just put clever words together for a vision statement, but they also paint a word picture. And I really captured this when I think about in the book of Genesis, where God gave Abraham a vision. And he gave him, first of all, words. He says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. And Abraham said, fine, I'm ready for that. But God didn't stop there. He said, now step outside the tent and look up into the stars and start counting them. That's the number of offspring that you're going to have. And so a great vision is not only clever words of maybe where you want to go, but it also presents a word picture. Because I can imagine that Abraham had those words, and maybe he got busy in life and lost the words. But every time he stepped out at night and looked up to the stars, he was reminded of the word picture. And so think about the fact that, does your vision statement create a word picture for those that are in your organization or those that hear about it? I was reminded of an airline in Europe, and their vision statement is, we'll take you there. Simple as that. You dream about your vacation, and we'll take you there. So again, there was a word picture that was created with that simple vision statement of, you dream and we'll take you there. I was reminded about when some years ago, Wanda and I were house hunting, and we would go on those virtual tours that they have now of seeing houses, and we would look at the pictures and we would go, wow, we've got to see this house, and man, this land looks incredible. And then when we get there, we would go, oh, wow, this doesn't look anything like what we saw in the picture. The reality didn't match up with the picture that we saw online. And I guess that's what a good photographer does. They present a picture online that entices you to want to come to look at the property. Well, we did find a property that was for us, but it wasn't based upon the picture that we saw. However, I am saying this, that good visions do entice you with a good word picture that helps you to capture you and bring you in. The third thing I want to mention about effective vision is that good vision statements are meant to be updated and changed. Yes, updated and changed, not forever and ever. In fact, I've heard prominent leaders say that vision should be evaluated and perhaps changed every 7 years. And I've kind of taken that in, and as I look back over our church that's been in existence now for 21 years, we've had 3 different vision statements or mission statements. And so we started with one, kind of midway through, we changed to another, and now recently we have a third one. Now, I didn't really change the direction of the church. It's just that I felt like that the language needed to be updated. It needed to be refreshed. Maybe the culture has changed. For instance, now in the 20s, the 2020s, we're in a whole different environment than we were in the teens. We've just come through a pandemic. We're coming through one. I mean, there's a lot of changes that have happened in the world, and sometimes you got to go back to your vision statement and say, does it match up? Or maybe your organization grew in a direction that you didn't expect. That can happen, and so you have to adapt that vision statement over to where the growth is occurring, because that's what's happening. And so a vision statement should be dynamic, not static. It should be something that is living, and therefore needs to be evaluated and changed over time. Now, let me just recap this section on vision, and then we'll move on to values. Number one, determine who you are and who you're not. That's important. And engage in several personality evaluations to help determine that. Ask other people what they see in your leadership, and just get their honest opinion in that. That's always helpful. I've heard it said that we don't attract who we want, we attract who we are. We don't attract who we want, we attract who we are. I'd love to attract a lot of millionaires at our church, right? Hasn't happened yet. But what I found that we do attract in not just the people that come, but over the years, there's been burned out leaders. There's been pastors that have, for whatever reason, been without a church assignment, and they come to our church and they rest. They feel safe. They feel encouraged. That's not something I planned, but it's something that's within the vision of what has been happening in our church, and I recognize that. So again, it's like we attract leaders that are burned out, and then they get refreshed and they go out and take another church assignment and go for it. So again, recognize that you don't attract who you want, you attract who you are. The second thing in vision, and recap here, is don't just communicate a vision with words. Create a word picture. So much more effective that, as they say, a picture creates or captures or is 1,000 words. And so you actually multiply your vision when you have a word picture associated with it. And the final thing is refresh your vision every several years. Don't just say this is forever and ever and will never change. But the final thing I want to say is leading with vision is important. In fact, there's a Proverbs that says that without a vision, the people perish. And digging a little deeper in that, another translation says, without a vision, people cast off restraint. What that essentially means is if you don't have a vision for them, they're going to make up their own. It to me is like the bumper guards in a bowling alley. A vision is like the bumper guards. You might throw a bad ball and it'll go in the gutter, but it's rarely, if ever, going to jump over into the other lane, because the vision sets up those bumper guards for that ball to flop back and forth and perhaps even get into the middle and give that person a strike, or give your organization a strike. And so that's what a good vision does. It's like a river. A river is flowing with life. It's going somewhere. A swamp is sitting there. There's probably more water in a swamp, but it's stale and stagnant. A river is flowing. It's life-giving. It has banks. And that's what a good vision does. That it gives us the opportunity to move in a way that is life-giving and important and valuable for all those involved. Now let's jump over into the values realm. Values are the underpinning of vision. Values are, vision is more general. Values are more specific, or even more meaningful for the organization. Values are the lens that you see life through, and your people see life through. For instance, you can, I've heard it said that values are like germs. We all have them. Where did we get them? We picked them up somewhere. So values come from your family of origin, what your family deemed was important and what not. They also come from the culture that you grew up in, what the culture deems important and what not. That's how we accumulate values. And so when you get into an organization that begins to form values, you have to realize that everybody has their personal values, but then you have corporate, or you have company, or you have organizational values. And sometimes they can clash, and other times they can be the same or similar, that the people can function in your organization when they're there, even though they might have personal values that are different when they're not a part of your organization or on their own times. So values are something that is deeper. It's something that's more meaningful. As I shared earlier, I was a part of a multi-site, multi-location or multi-staff church. And so the senior leader there had this vision of wanting to be one church in many locations. And there's nothing wrong with that vision. In fact, I supported it. Now what happened is that over time, and he reached this place of saying that all the pastors that were at their outlying locations, their satellite locations, that they would need to leave their offices there and come to a central location, and that we would pastor our satellites from a central location. And that's when my personal value began to rub against the corporate value. I said, that's not me. I want to be in the satellite location. Sure, I can come together centrally for meetings, but I want to be there with the people. I want to be with my community. I want to be with my congregation. I don't want to be in a central location apart from them. And so again, it's just an example of a value change that happened. Now, there was nothing wrong with his vision. There was nothing wrong with his value wanting to centralize. It just didn't fit me. And so as a result, over time, I resigned and I planted a church on my own that more fit the value that I saw in the setting and the organization that I was a part of. So again, just giving you an example of a value change. I think of a father that had or has 6 children, 5 boys and 1 girl, and all of his boys play football. So you can imagine father and his wife, they spent a lot of times cheering in the stands. But his father, and so football, contact sport, right? Contact sport, the players get hurt. The father had this value. Every time that there would be a player that would get hurt on the field and be carried to the sidelines or taken into the locker room, he would follow them and he would begin praying and asking for healing for that hurt player. And over the period of years, the coach said, I can always count on the father coming and praying for those hurt players. It was a predictable behavior. And that's what values are. Values are a predictable behavior of what you want your people, when they're at work with you or a part of your organization, they are a predictable behavior of how they are going to serve or how they're going to respond to people, whether within your organization or those coming to join your organization or those that are receiving your product. Let me just recap something here. And that is, vision is what you are doing and where you are going. Vision, what you're doing, where you're going. Values are why you are doing it and whether or not it's actually meaningful. Why you are doing it and whether or not it's actually meaningful. People that are in your organization, they're wondering, are they making a difference? Part of your leadership is affirming the fact that they are making a difference. People want to know, is this company going up or is it going under? People in the church want to know, is the church growing or are we just in constant turnover? Again, these are things that people are thinking. It really fits in the whole values realm. And so values are both meaningful and they are necessary. For instance, we place a high value in our church on prayer. And so what we've done in order to highlight that is that we've given many opportunities for people to pray in groups. At the end of our service, we have a time for people to come for prayer. And I've noticed that as we talk with people on the phone or maybe have counseling sessions or sessions with people, we will either open up in prayer or end with prayer. And also, after the service is dismissed, there'll be people in small groups talking, and I will observe that before they leave, they'll often pray for one another before they disperse for the week. You see, we have made prayer a value. We have modeled that, and it's become a predictable behavior among our people at our church. Values is something that it affects. It begins to become your culture. And so realize that values are something that they're a trait, they are a characteristic of people begin to identify with your organization because of the values that you have, not necessarily the vision you have. That's what's meaningful to people. People feel values. They sometimes don't know, they sometimes can't articulate what it is, but they feel it, and they know when it's gone, and they know when it's changed. And so values sometimes can be very intuitive as far as how they work. Values guide communication. They direct decision making. They help in problem solving. They also affect your planning as well. Values are deeper than vision. Values define who that you are. Vision defines where you're going. So in really determining how to establish values in your organization, one of the key things is whatever you decide are your values, you as a senior leader must live it and model it. And if you're not willing to live it and model it, then those around you, whether they're your hired staff or those that are part of your company that look to you, if you don't live your values, then they're going to determine that's not important. For instance, you could be a leader that says, I want my people to show up and be energetic about what they're doing, but you show up late and complain about being tired. Guess what's going to happen? That's a value. Guess what's going to happen? You're saying that you want them to show up and be energetic, but you're showing up late and you're complaining about being tired. So they're going to determine that's not a value to him. Therefore, we don't need to do it as well. You see, one of the things I've observed is that values are not just said, but they're seen. In other words, people need to see your values, not just hear that you have them. Such a big difference I see in this breakdown of leaders that say that they want to have these values and important, and it's things that they say, but yet oftentimes they break down in living them. And that's why it's so important that you build a vision and values around who you are and recognize who you are and who you're not, so that it becomes more natural to live them, and you don't even have to think about it, then others come alongside. As I said, the congregation that I started now 21 years ago really grew to about 150 people and stayed there for 15 years. And I have some observations about that I'll share here at in a few moments. But one of the things that I recognized is that my values, again, were to communicate what was meaningful to people. And so I wasn't really focused as much on vision as I was values. And then all of a sudden, in the last 5 years, our church just all of a sudden took off, grew now to 250 and keeps on going. And during that time, I had a side business, which I was splitting up my time between the side business and the church. And it seemed manageable at the time at 150. And then all of a sudden at 250, it's like, I can't do this anymore. I don't have the emotional bandwidth to do both. And so I had to disperse of the side business and then come and take on full-time leadership of the church. Again, that's a value change. I enjoyed the side business. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed the church, having a lot of fun. Could not do both. I had to switch up my value to now bring it over into the church arena and let go of the side business. And then the church is even growing further as a result of giving more focused attention. So the point is that values must be seen, not just said. My father loved poetry, and one of the poems that he would recite to us as a family, it was the title of it was, "I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day." And the same is true with values. People would rather see values in action rather than hear about that you have a value. Let me recap this section and wrap up today's podcast. While vision outlines the character of your company, values are the characteristic of your company. Number 2, values reveal your predicted behavior. When you list out your values as an organization, think about, how do I want people to behave? How do I want them to serve? How do I want them to respond? And that would be in the realm of your values. The third aspect about values is that they must be seen, not just said. And you as the leader are a primary key in that. It's not just, these are my intentions. No, what are your actions? That relates to our values. And the final thing is that the values are not right or wrong, they're just different. And oftentimes we can make them right or wrong. Well, they may be in the company that you're in, like for instance, your employees might have different personal values, but when they come to your organization and get a part of it, then they adopt or bend towards your corporate or company or organization values, and we can all do that. And yet sometimes we get stretched in that. For instance, I gave the example of being in that multi-site church, and when the senior pastor changed the vision of being one church in many locations to coming off-site to be central, I recognized that was too much of a stretch for me. I needed to then go do something else. Now the big question: are you a vision-driven leader, or are you a values-driven leader? You see, for many years, I was a values-driven leader. Probably the reason why my church grew to 150 and stayed there for a long period of time, because I was concentrating on values. But then I began to realize, no, it's a combination of the two. And I began to switch over and recognize the benefit and the place that vision had, being underpinned with values, but vision needs to lead. And I began to switch in the last 5 years, and probably some of the reason why the church took off and started growing, because vision was beginning to be infused. And so that's one observation. So I started out being a values-driven leader, but now I've kind of switched over to be a vision first, values second leader. The second observation I have about this is that if you're a vision-driven leader, you will get there faster. You will have greater growth. You'll get there sooner. If you're a values-driven leader, it will be more meaningful to you along the way. You'll have deeper relationship and meaning. You're not going as fast, but you're going deeper along the way. And I believe that there's a combination of both that you'll find the rhythm in your organization or company in order to realize that both are important and both have their place. So maybe with those descriptions, you can begin to recognize which one are you. I pass the baton over to you to recognize which bent do you have, values-driven or vision-driven. And you have to have the wisdom to know which one, so that you can begin to adapt and begin to reorganize into what you're supposed to be and what the organization needs from you in order to lead. Sometimes we need to stress values. Other times we need to stress vision. It's important to know the difference and to know what you're bent as a leader so that you can lead effectively. And other people, when they sense that you're at peace, then they'll be at peace and be able to do their job in a very effective way. So I trust this podcast on what kind of leader you are. You a vision leader or a values leader is helpful for you. Maybe you have some comments that you'd like to drop in the comment section. Maybe you have a question that you'd like to ask us further about something that we could help you with. Again, we're available to help you. Our desire is that we would have a Lift Leadership podcast available around the 25th of every month. And so that's our desire and goal to do that. You can look forward to that. You can subscribe. And then we have two platforms. One is in our YouTube channel that you can watch, and another is on Podbean that you can listen to. Whichever platform you prefer, we want to provide for you. Again, thank you for listening. And until next time, I pass the baton to you to determine whether you are a values-driven leader or a vision-driven leader, and to know the difference.